People should be making decisions about what they need to support themselves and their families, not taking advice from Mr. Jones. If people are in a situation where they need financial assistance, then it's of course an option that they should consider as part of the challenges they face overall, because it simply makes no sense that people can't afford to do things like pay their mortgage, but in 30 years' time they'll have plenty to retire on, rather than dealing with the repayments they need now, getting assistance to keep their home now, and of course, when the economy recovers, being able to put that money back in. It's a pretty simple proposition.
The scheme has been somewhat undersubscribed. I have to correct myself for a figure I used with Stephen Jones before, because we've had 313,000 applications approved, totalling $2.7 billion, and there were 1.35 million people planned to access the scheme at a total withdrawal of $25 billion. Why do you think those numbers are so much lower than anticipated?
Well, firstly, because those numbers were developed before the JobKeeper program, so the wage subsidy has made it easier for some people. But of course, it's very much based on individual circumstances. All you can do when you develop financial plans on behalf of the government is make estimations about what you think is likely to occur. So I don't think it's about it being under or oversubscribed. It's a reflection of the strong decisions the government has made in providing support and assistance to people, while also making sure that those people who have lost their employment or need extra financial flexibility can get assistance through their superannuation. And that's why the hyperbolic statements of Mr. Jones, frankly, are absurd, because he is obsessing about these issues and constraining the choices Australians need during this difficult time to support themselves and their family and do basic things like keep their homes.
Now, you've been quite vocal about superannuation funds' liquidity, in particular about asset write-downs at super funds being more extreme than comparable companies outside of the superannuation industry. That has been quite poorly received by the superannuation industry. Do you still stand by that?
Well, what I've done is ask questions, and that's all we've done. As chair of the House Economics Committee, we have a term-long inquiry looking at the big four banks and the financial services system overall. We're looking at the impact of, even before COVID-19, the stability of the banking sector, and we've been asking them difficult questions. We've been asking difficult questions of the super funds. We absolutely have been. Industry and retail. We've been asking difficult questions of the insurance sector. In fact, we have hearings next week to go through issues around the Royal Commission and insurance, and of course, the issues around insurance and COVID-19. And we have the financial advice sector coming in before the end of the year. So our job as parliamentarians is to ask the difficult questions in the public interest, and I'm not going to back down one iota.
What do you make of the proposition that if super funds are having liquidity issues, they should be looking at mergers more than any kind of external assistance? Well,
what we've seen comments from Greg Combay, who's the chair of Industry Super Australia, is that they don't have liquidity issues. And this is part of the challenge that we're all facing, is trying to get clarity about what the situation is. The last time we had Industry Super before the House Economics Committee, they came before and they boasted about how they were taking strategies that extracted illiquidity premiums. These are not my words, they're their words. And that was the specific comment that was made by Hostplus. Then only 6 months later, they're suddenly saying they've got a liquidity crisis. So there's a legitimate reason to inquire about these issues and to raise very serious concerns about the inconsistency between what they've said and what has since happened. And we did ask about different scenarios that presented themselves. In fact, some super funds talk specifically about the challenges they face around the GFC and stress testing those scenarios, as well as stress testing scenarios that were worse than the global financial crisis, which could include the current pandemic that we face. Now, how super funds respond is ultimately a matter for them and, of course, the people who invested with them. But the important thing is to make sure we get to the bottom of these questions so that they're telling the public truthfully the interests, rather than trusting the opinions of people like Stephen Jones, who's frankly in collusion with many funds in his public statements, because he's ultimately a puppet of them.
Now, if I can ask you about the comments of the Reserve Bank Governor yesterday about tax reform. You, more than anyone in the coalition, spearheaded the campaign to protect franking credits in the lead up to the last election. Do you think the government should rule out any changes to franking credits in the wash-up from dealing with the coronavirus pandemic?
Well, the simple proposition there should be changes to refundable franking credits is absurd, because the basis in which refundable franking credits are provided to Australian shareholders and Australian retirees is when companies make profits and then dividend imputation passes the tax through, and then there's the refund. Many companies this year, frankly, are going to struggle to make a profit. I think that's a pretty obvious statement of fact, and I think that reflects in the share market prices. So I don't even see why this is a conversation. This is just the Labor Party continuing to prosecute an argument they lost at the last election when they wouldn't accept more than 1 million Australians would dramatically lose their income if there was an election of a Labor government, and don't understand the complexities of the tax system. So they keep making this basic error.
And if I can ask, you'll be chairing the Economics Committee public hearings next week, and you'll be covering a lot of issues about insurance. Now, plenty of people have experienced the fact that the coronavirus pandemic isn't really covered by a lot of insurance policies, that it's considered an act of God in some instances, or just simply not covered. Is this something you'll be prosecuting?
Resolutely, yes, because there are a lot of people, for instance, in travel policies that have exemptions related to pandemics. But there's also a broader question around how the insurance sector responds to pandemics if they were to occur in the future. Now, obviously, we have isolated ones. We've had isolated ones in the past. We're obviously in the middle of a 100-year event. And I think what we're all looking for is a sense of confidence about how the insurance sector is going to respond, how it's going to develop potentially new products or new components of their products to reflect and understand those concerns, and to make sure that we can mitigate the risks that face many Australians, whether they're in the area of health insurance, whether in the area of travel insurance, or of course, in many cases where people need it related to property insurance and landlord insurance. So it's across the board.